Zanelle sat by the roadside, blood staining her skirt, her body shaking from pain and shock. Just hours ago, she had been in her own home, carrying her first child, praying every night for a safe delivery. But when the cramps came, sharp and fast, she cried for help. Kuto, her husband, looked at her with disgust. "You're cursed," he said coldly. "You've brought shame into my home." He didn't call a doctor. He didn't hold her. Instead, he dragged her out and threw her onto the dirt like trash. Neighbors gathered. Some whispered. Others watched in silence. No one helped. Zanelle, weak and heartbroken, lost her baby that night. The only comfort she had was the hospital bed she finally reached, hours later, thanks to a kind stranger. Weeks passed. Her in-laws spread lies in the village, that she used dark magic, that her womb was rotten. Kuto even filed for divorce, telling the court she was dangerous. Zanelle sat in silence, her dignity shattered, her future uncertain. But her lawyer, a quiet woman named Mara, had been digging deeper. Then came the court date. The room was packed. Kuto stood proud, telling the judge how Zanelle brought curses into his family. His mother sat beside him, head high, acting innocent. But Mara walked to the center, holding a sealed envelope. "This," she said, "is the doctor's final report." The judge opened it. Silence. The miscarriage wasn't natural. The report confirmed that herbs, poisonous ones, were found in Zanelle's system. Herbs that cause uterine bleeding. Herbs that are commonly used in village traditions to end pregnancies. Herbs she never took willingly. Mara looked Kuto in the eye. "This was in her food," she said. "Food prepared daily by your mother." Gasps filled the courtroom. Kuto's mother turned pale. Kuto tried to speak, but the judge raised his hand. Zanelle sat still, tears rolling down her face. Not from pain, but from justice finally breathing in her direction. The case went viral. Radio stations, bloggers, and TV crews picked it up. "Woman branded cursed, but was poisoned by in-laws," the headlines screamed. People who once judged her now apologized. Strangers messaged her with love and support. Women shared their own stories. And Kuto's family investigated. Forgotten. Zanelle didn't just survive. She became a voice. For every woman thrown out in silence. For every mother who never got to be one. And it all started with one sealed note. And the truth it refused to bury. Neria sat on the cold floor of her bedroom, her arms wrapped tightly around her belly as if she could still protect what was already gone. The bleeding had started in the middle of the night. She had cried out for help, but her husband, Dowdy, barely moved. He stood in the doorway, looking at her with disappointment instead of concern. "You've failed me," he said bitterly. "You've lost the baby. You're no longer fit to be my wife." He left her there, alone, in pain and broken. The next morning, he packed her clothes in a black plastic bag and told her to go. She begged him to take her to the hospital, but he refused. "You can walk," he said. "Go to your parents and cry there." Neria didn't even have the strength to argue. She stumbled her way to the clinic down the street, heart aching with every step. The nurse on duty rushed her in immediately, seeing the signs of severe blood loss. She stayed in the hospital for 3 days. Quiet. Shame. Grieving. But something felt off. Before her miscarriage, Neria had complained several times about unusual cramps, headaches, and weakness. Each time she told Dowdy, he brushed it off. "You worry too much," he would say. "You're just lazy." One of the doctors, Dr. Lemiso, gently told her during her stay. "You should have been on bed rest weeks ago. We saw signs of complications from the scans. Didn't your husband tell you?" Neria stared at him, confused. "What scans?" Dr. Lemiso checked the file again and nodded. He came to pick them up, signed for them himself. He knew. Something inside Neria snapped. All this time she blamed herself. All this time she thought she had failed. But the truth was, Dowdy had known. He didn't tell her. He didn't care. A few weeks after she recovered, her cousin Asha, who worked at the county records office, came across something even more disturbing. "Neria," she said, "Dowdy has been processing marriage papers with another woman. He started the paperwork a month before you lost the baby." Neria couldn't believe it. While she cried in pain and prayed for their child, Dowdy had already moved on. The miscarriage had only made his plan easier. He blamed her just so he could walk away guilt-free. With the help of a lawyer, Neria collected every report. The doctor's note. The hospital files. The signature Dowdy left when he picked up her scan. It was all there. The truth. She posted her story online with one sentence. I was blamed, but the truth had a signature. The post went viral in hours. Women across the country shared their own stories. TV stations called. Radio hosts cried while reading her words live on air. Dowdy's world fell apart. The new bride ran. His job put him on leave. His name became a warning sign. But Neria arose. She started a foundation for women's health awareness. And every time she speaks, she holds up the doctor's note and says, "This piece of paper saved my life." The rain poured heavily that night, thundering against the tin roof as Thandile stood outside in the dark, holding nothing but her torn shawl around her shoulders. Her hair was wet, her eyes swollen from crying, and her body still weak from the miscarriage she had just suffered. But there was no mercy. Her husband, Jabo, had pushed her out of the house like a stranger. "You failed me," he shouted before slamming the door. "You killed my child. You're not a real woman." His family stood behind him, nodding in silence. No one stopped him. No one helped her. And so, in the middle of the storm, Thandile walked away, shivering, heartbroken and lost. For weeks, she stayed with her aunt in a small village far away, saying little, eating even less. The pain of losing her baby was already too much. But being blamed for it, as if it was her fault, made it unbearable. She replayed Jabo's words over and over again in her mind. Maybe he was right. Maybe she had failed. But then, months later, an envelope arrived. It was from a nurse at the city hospital, someone Thandile barely remembered. Inside was a folded medical report and a short handwritten note. "You deserve to know the truth. I couldn't stay silent." Her hands shook as she read the report. The baby had a rare genetic disorder, something that had nothing to do with her. The condition was inherited from the father's side. The note clearly stated that tests had confirmed the disorder could only have come from Jabo's bloodline. He had known. The results were shared with him first. Thandile sat there in silence for hours, staring at the truth. The man who blamed her knew it wasn't her fault. He threw her into the storm while hiding his own guilt. That year, Jabo's family hosted their annual family celebration, a big gathering with music, food, and speeches. Thandile, now stronger and no longer ashamed, decided to go. People whispered when they saw her walk in. Jabo froze. His new fiancée smiled awkwardly, unaware of what was coming. When Thandile was asked to say a few words, she stepped forward with the letter in her hand. "I lost a child," she said softly, "but I didn't lose my truth." Then she began to read the report aloud, every line, every word, in front of the entire family. Gasps echoed through the yard. Jabo's mother covered her mouth. His father lowered his head. She finished, looked Jabo in the eyes and said, "You lied to me, to your family, and to this entire village." There was silence. And then someone began clapping, then another, until the whole yard echoed with applause, not for her loss but for her courage. Her story was later shared online by her cousin. Thousands of women commented, thanking her for speaking up. "We've all been blamed," one wrote, "but the truth always finds a voice." And Thandile, once cast out in the rain, now stood in the sun, strong, unafraid and free. Aching sat on the hospital bed, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, trying to make sense of what had just happened. She had lost her baby. The tiny heartbeat she had once heard with so much joy was now gone. But even before the tears could dry from her face, her in-laws arrived, not with comfort but with anger. Her mother-in-law pointed at her like a criminal. "You're unfit to carry our blood," she shouted. "You bring shame to this family." Her father-in-law didn't even look at her. And her husband, Brian, stood quietly, hands in his pockets, acting like he didn't know her pain. Then came the final blow. "Leave," Brian said coldly. "You have no place in our home anymore." They packed her things into a single bag and threw it at her feet. "No ride. No help. Just cold eyes and cruel words. Aking left the hospital gates with a heavy heart and bruises hidden beneath her long sleeves. No one knew the truth, that the night she lost the baby, Brian had hit her. He had come home drunk, angry over something small, and pushed her hard against the wall. She had begged him to stop. He didn't. She never planned to tell anyone. Who would believe her over the word of the powerful Odhiambo family? They had money, status, and control. She had nothing. Just pain. Weeks passed. Aking stayed with a friend and kept quiet. But one day, while looking through her hospital bag, she found a folded paper she didn't remember putting there. It was from the doctor. A medical report. It detailed the cause of the miscarriage. The bruises. Trauma. It even mentioned the marks on her back, arms, and ribs. Everything matched what Brian did to her. First she was scared. Then she got angry. She had stayed silent for too long. Her friend, who worked for a popular blog, shared the story, along with a letter with Aking's permission. It went viral overnight. Wife loses baby after domestic abuse. Husband's family calls her unfit, the headlines read. The public was furious. People demanded answers. Women across the country shared the story. News stations called her for interviews. Lawyers offered to help for free. Brian tried to deny it at first, but the doctor confirmed the letter. Photos of Aking's bruises surfaced. Old messages where she had once told him she was scared were found. The truth couldn't hide anymore. The Odhiambo family tried to silence the media, but it was too late. Brian lost his job. His family's company faced protests. And Aking, she stood tall. She became a symbol. A voice for women who were blamed, abused, and discarded. In her first interview, she held the doctor's letter in her hand and said, "They said I was unfit, but this note showed who really was." And just like that, the man who wore a mask of charm and respectability lost everything, because the truth finally spoke louder than his lies. Bisasau stood outside the gate, her face pale and swollen from crying. Her hands shook as she knocked one last time, hoping someone, anyone, would let her in. But the door stayed closed. Her husband, Mandla, had already made his choice. "You're no use to me now," he had said coldly, just hours after she lost their baby. She had begged him to take her to the clinic when the bleeding started. Instead, he laughed in her face, calling her weak, calling her useless. When she collapsed, he didn't carry her. He shoved her out. And his family, watching from the window, said nothing. One aunt even muttered, "She probably brought this on herself." Bisasau lay on a neighbor's porch until someone found her and called for help. At the hospital, the doctor examined her carefully. Quietly. Gently. There were bruises on her ribs, on her back, fresh ones. Signs of trauma. The doctor asked her what happened, but she didn't speak. She was too tired. Too ashamed. Before she was discharged, the nurse handed her a sealed envelope. "This is your medical report," she said. "Keep it safe." Bisasau didn't open it. She pushed it into the bottom of her bag and left, with no home to return to. A month later, Mandla dragged her back into court, not for an apology, not for a reunion, but to take her late father's land. He claimed she had no right to it, that as a childless wife, she no longer held a place in his family. His lawyer painted her as a failure, a disgrace. He even accused her of neglecting the pregnancy. Bisasau stood quietly in the courtroom, holding her bag tight. When it was her turn to speak, she didn't argue. She simply reached in, pulled out the crumpled envelope, and handed it to the judge. "This is my truth," she said softly. The courtroom fell silent as the judge read the doctor's note. It detailed the bruises, the physical assault, and the trauma that caused her miscarriage. The judge looked up at Mandla sharply. "You failed her," he said. "And now you want to take what's hers." In one moment everything shifted. The courtroom turned on Mandla. His smug smile disappeared. The land case was thrown out. The judge ruled in Bisasau's favor, not just for the land, but with an official restraining order and the right to seek damages. Outside the courthouse, people waited to hear the story. One reporter asked, "How did you find the strength to fight back?" Bisasau held up the paper and said, They left me with nothing, but this note was stronger than all their lies. Her story spread like wildfire. Women across the country saw her as a warrior. Not because she fought loud, but because she stood strong when they tried to bury her. And the land Mandla wanted, Bisasio turned it into a women's shelter, where no woman would be mocked, pushed out, or left bleeding ever again. Murembe sat on the bench outside her husband's family home, her eyes blank, her hands resting on her empty belly. Just a few days ago she had been full of joy, preparing for her baby, dreaming of names, and talking to the growing life inside her. But one morning the cramps started, then the bleeding, and just like that everything was gone. She cried in pain, begged to be taken to the hospital, but her mother-in-law looked at her with cold eyes and said, "You brought this on yourself. You play with dark things." Soon the whole village was whispering. They said Murembe used witchcraft, that she had cursed her own baby. Her husband, Juma, didn't defend her. He stood in silence as his parents threw her clothes out and told her to leave. "You embarrassed us," he said. "We want nothing to do with you." With nowhere to go, Murembe walked for hours before collapsing near a roadside clinic. It wasn't a government hospital, but a foreign-run medical charity. The nurses took her in, gave her clean sheets, medicine, and, most of all, kindness. They ran tests, monitored her for days, and asked her questions gently. One doctor, a kind woman from the Netherlands, sat beside her bed and said, "Murembe, what happened to you was not your fault. You caught an infection, something rare, something serious. It would have harmed any woman, no matter how strong." Murembe could barely process it. She hadn't cursed her baby. She hadn't failed. Weeks later, back at her aunt's house, an envelope arrived. It was from the same charity hospital. Inside was a full medical report, along with a letter signed by the head doctor. It explained everything clearly: the name of the infection, how it spreads, and how it is often passed through sexual contact. And the twist: the infection matched one commonly found in men who have multiple unprotected affairs. He had been cheating on her. For years. He gave her the infection that cost her the baby, then stood there and watched her be shamed as a witch. Murembe posted the report online with only one sentence: "You blamed me, but the truth has a name, and it's not mine." The internet exploded. People were furious. The charity organization confirmed the report. Activists picked up the story. Hashtags trended overnight. Hashtag justice for Murembe. Hashtag stop the shaming. Juma's secrets were no longer hidden. His new girlfriends vanished. His reputation was destroyed. The same village that once called Murembe cursed now called her brave. She didn't stop there. Murembe began working with the charity that saved her. She spoke at events, helped launch a campaign about reproductive health and medical truth. And every time she told her story, she held up that letter and said, "This paper didn't just save me, it gave me back my voice." She lost her baby, but she found her power, and the whole world listened. Olamide sat alone in her small apartment, the curtains drawn, her phone switched off, and her heart shattered into 1,000 quiet pieces. Just a few days ago, she had been a happy, glowing woman preparing for motherhood. But then the cramps came, then the bleeding, then the silence in the scan room. The baby was gone. She returned home empty, numb, still trying to breathe through the pain. But what she didn't expect, what broke her even more, was what came next. Her fiancé, Femi, told everyone she had been lying the whole time, that she was never pregnant, that she faked it to trap him. He told his family, his friends, his workplace. The news spread like wildfire. Olamide's neighbors whispered behind her back. People she loved stopped calling. Even at church, the stares followed her like shadows. "I knew she was desperate," one woman said out loud. "Imagine lying about a baby," another muttered. Femi didn't stop there. He married someone else within weeks. A woman from a wealthy family. Pictures from the wedding flooded social media, showing a perfect, smiling couple. And Olamide, she became the punchline to their perfect love story. But what Femi didn't know was that when Olamide left the hospital, the nurse had placed something important in her file, a set of discharge papers. They clearly confirmed her pregnancy and the miscarriage. Her friend Teo, who stood by her from day one, saw the papers and grew furious. "This isn't just cruel, it's evil," Tayo said. With Olamide's permission, Tayo posted the papers online, along with the full story. She added photos from the hospital, the doctor's note, and the timeline. She didn't use hateful words. She just told the truth. Within hours, the post exploded. Thousands shared it. People were outraged. Celebrities reposted it. Doctors commented, confirming the medical terms. The tag #Olamide did not lie started trending. People demanded answers. How could a man accuse a grieving woman of faking pregnancy just to protect his image? Femi's new wife saw the post, and reportedly left him the same week. His company suspended him after public pressure. His reputation crumbled. Olamide didn't speak for days. Then, when she finally posted, her words were simple. "I didn't fight back because I was in pain, but now the truth has spoken for me." TV shows invited her. Ngios reached out. She became a quiet but powerful face of truth, of what happens when a woman is blamed without proof, and how the smallest piece of paper can destroy a mountain of lies. Olamide still grieves. She still cries some nights. But now she walks with her head held high, not because she won a fight, but because she survived a lie and lived to tell the truth. Ayanda sat quietly on the edge of the bed, her eyes red from crying, one hand resting gently on her stomach, where life had once been growing. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the sound of her own breathing. She had just lost her baby. She hadn't even had time to understand the grief when the voices started shouting from outside the room. Her mother-in-law barged in first. "You failed as a woman," she spat. "You were never strong enough for this family." Her husband, Simo, didn't defend her. He joined in. "You embarrassed me," he said coldly. "You're useless." Ayanda was still weak, barely able to stand, but they didn't care. They dragged her out of the house that night. It was raining. She was barefoot, her clothes still stained with blood. Neighbors watched from windows, some whispering, others just turning away. She probably did something wrong. Women like her always find a way to ruin things. No one helped. No one asked questions. Ayanda was left to grieve in silence, carrying both the pain of her miscarriage and the weight of shame placed on her. But what no one knew was that a doctor at the hospital had seen everything. The bruises on her arms, the swelling on her face, the signs of physical trauma. When he asked her gently what happened, she didn't speak. She just cried. Before discharging her, the doctor handed her an envelope. "Keep this," he said. "You may need it one day." Ayanda didn't even look at the paper. She just took it and tucked it away. For a year, she stayed with a distant cousin. She avoided people. She stayed off social media. She barely spoke about what happened. But grief has a way of turning into quiet strength. 1 year later, Ayanda returned to that same house. But this time she didn't come alone. She stood at the gate with a lawyer by her side, a copy of the doctor's official note in hand. The letter clearly stated that Ayanda had been physically fit during the pregnancy. The miscarriage, it said, was caused by external trauma, direct blows to the body. Simo's face turned pale. His mother's lips trembled. "You blamed me," Ayanda said, her voice steady. "But the truth never left. You just tried to silence it." The lawyer filed charges. The news spread quickly. The community was shocked. TV and radio picked up the story. People who once whispered now apologized. The post showing the doctor's note went viral. #IandaSpoke started trending. Ayanda didn't want revenge. She wanted justice. And she got it. Simo lost his government job. His mother was publicly shamed. But more importantly, Ayanda's truth was heard. She now works with a women's legal aid center, helping others who were once silenced like her. She often holds up the letter and says, "I stayed quiet, but this paper didn't." Her grief was heavy, but the truth, it spoke louder than every lie they ever told. McKenna sat on the hospital bed, her body aching and her eyes swollen from crying. The news had come fast, the baby was gone. Just a few weeks before, she and her fiancé, Kelvin, had been talking about baby names. She had imagined the nursery, the first smile, the tiny fingers wrapped around hers. But now all of that was gone. Before she could even leave the hospital, Kelvin showed up, not with flowers or comfort, but with blame. "This is your fault," he snapped. "You were careless. You stressed too much. I can't do this anymore." He left her there, still in pain, still bleeding, and by evening, he had packed up his things and moved out of their home. His family backed him. They said McKenna was always too emotional, that she couldn't handle pressure, that maybe she wasn't ready to be a wife or a mother. McKenna didn't fight back. She didn't have the strength, but deep down she knew the truth. In the final months of her pregnancy, she had discovered Kelvin's affair with someone she knew. When she confronted him, he gaslit her, yelled, and stormed out for days. The stress nearly broke her. The sleepless nights, the silent crying, the constant worry. She tried to hold on for the baby. Before being discharged, her doctor handed her a letter. "You might need this," he said. "It explains the cause." She tucked it into her bag and forgot about it. Weeks passed. The village believed Kelvin. They whispered that McKenna had failed him, failed the child. She moved to her aunt's house in another town, kept quiet, and tried to heal. But one day, while cleaning her things, she found the letter again. Curious, she opened it. The doctor had written clearly, "Miscarriage likely caused by extreme emotional and psychological stress. No signs of physical harm or medical complications. Patient history includes recent emotional trauma related to partner's infidelity." McKenna froze. Her pain had a name. And it wasn't her. She returned to the village, head high, letter in hand. The local women's council was holding a public event in the square. McKenna asked for the mic. She read the letter out loud. The crowd went silent. Then came the gasp, the murmurs, the outrage. Kelvin, who had recently announced his engagement to the same woman he cheated with, tried to deny everything. But the doctor confirmed the letter. The affair was already known. Now the truth was too. Protests broke out. Women marched with signs saying "No more blame," and "Stress is violence too." McKenna's story went viral. Her cousin posted a video of her reading the letter. It reached over 2 million views in days. Kelvin lost his public relations job. His new fiancée disappeared from social media. His family issued a public apology. McKenna, once broken, became a voice. She now speaks at clinics and schools about emotional abuse and pregnancy health. And every time she says, "They blamed me," but the truth was already written. It just needed to be read. And when the crowd claps, McKenna doesn't smile in victory. She smiles in freedom. Kendi sat under a bridge one cold morning, barefoot and shivering, with nothing but a thin shawl wrapped around her. Just days before, she had been pregnant, full of hope, dreaming of a future with her child. But all of that had vanished. She had lost the baby suddenly, painfully, and before she could even process what happened, her husband kicked her out. He said she was cursed, said she brought bad luck. With no family nearby and no one to turn to, Kendi wandered the streets, hungry and broken. She thought about ending her life more than once. The pain, the shame, the silence, it was too much. Then one day, a traveling medical team set up a small health camp in the area. A young doctor saw Kendi, weak and barely conscious, and insisted on checking her. After some tests, he returned with a serious look on his face. "You didn't just lose your baby," he said gently. "You were drugged." Kendi's eyes widened. She didn't understand. The doctor handed her a written report. The lab results showed traces of substances commonly used to cause miscarriages. It hadn't been an accident, it had been planned. Kendi was in shock. She showed the report to a nearby women's center, and they immediately contacted the police. A full investigation began. The truth came out. Her husband had been seeing someone else, and had slipped something into her food. He was arrested. The story hit the news. People were outraged. Kendi, once left to die in silence, became a national voice. She now speaks at rallies and women's rights events, holding up the same paper that saved her. "I was broken," she says, "but this truth gave me back my life."